Hello once again, MMA fans. In this video, gonna be completely dedicated to Rampage Liddell 2. Yes, this video requires a whole feature on this rematch because it's that big of a rematch. I'm gonna go a little bit more in depth, obviously, into this fight. Also gonna take a look back at the first fight and talk about why the outcome was the way it was. So let's get right to it. I've seen the first fight in length, like many of you have, many times. It's actually playing on my TV right now as we speak, just for proof. Here you go. Don't know if you can see it, but there it is. Rampage Liddell going at it. Can't really see it too well. The cam's not transferring it, but anyway, if you watch this first fight and you've gone back and checked it out more than a couple times, you'll realize that this fight was fought at a very high pace. Especially that first 10-minute round was fought at a rigorous pace. Rampage really pushed that fight to Chuck Liddell. He had Liddell backing up a lot of that first round, if not all. Got the better of the exchanges, was able to secure a few takedowns. He really committed to his takedown attempts too. That's something I liked that Rampage did. If you noticed with Ortiz, his takedown attempts were very half-hearted in the last fight, but Rampage in this fight really committed to his takedown attempts, a la what Randy Couture did to Liddell in their fight. So, and obviously that really, I think that first round in the first fight really wore Liddell out more than anything else. And when he came out in the second round, he was just winging punches. His punches were very flat, there was no like snap in those punches. They were just arm punches, no torque behind him, no hip movement. He was flat-footed. I think that first round really sapped him because he's not really used to fighting a 10-minute first round. He dinked and dunked back and forth to Pride in the UFC a few years. He had some success in Pride, beat Guy Metzger, beat Alistair Overeem by knockout, granted, but when he ended up fighting Rampage that night, his ultimate demise was fighting such a long first round and being beaten up pretty much that whole first round by Rampage. And we all know what happens at the end. Rampage secures the takedown and is able to ground and pound Liddell out and get that big victory, the biggest victory of his career up until this point. And we all know what happens to Rampage later on that night. He goes on and has his first fight with Wanderlei Silva, and Wanderlei ends up winning with those brutal knees that he throws. He's got a more of a Muay Thai style of fighting, and this is something I'm going to get into in this prediction. Is you notice that Quentin in his losses, his most brutal losses have been to shoot-a-box fighters, both times to, and I'm not saying Marvin Eastman or Kazushi Sakuraba are shoot-a-box fighters. Although he did lose to Kazushi, he was just basically tired after he slammed Sakuraba down so many times, and that was his first fight in Pride, and he just basically ended up getting exhausted and got submitted by Sakuraba in that fight. But on to the losses that he's had as of late to Silva and to Shogun. Those losses were pretty much all the same. Especially in the Shogun fight, Rampage really came out flat. He even had a problem with Mauricio's brother, Ninja. It was a fight that a lot of people thought could have went Ninja's way. Even me watching the fight again, I thought possibly Ninja could have pulled that fight off. So he seems to have a problem with shoot-a-box fighters because of that Thai style they have. They have this really aggressive Muay Thai style that is dominated by a lot of knees, a lot of clinching, a lot of pressure. And he just seems to have problems with that particular style, and those guys seem to be the best at it. Just look at Anderson Silva, who's a product of shoot-a-box. So I don't think Liddell's going to make the trip down to Curitiba, Brazil to train with those guys. I don't think he'd be welcome there anyway, especially with Wanderlei Silva being the head of that camp, or one of the main fighters to come out of that camp. But onto the predictions. So we all know what happens in the first fight. And now on to the second fight. Both fighters have kind of gone different ways since that fight, though. Rampage losing to Silva a couple of times, losing to Shogun. His career is kind of at a crossroads, sort of. He signs a big contract with the WFA. They don't work out as an organization. Now he's in the UFC. Kind of really nowhere else for him to go at this point. Didn't want to go back to Pride. He's in the UFC now. pretty much, we all know why he's there. He knows why he's there. Liddell's career has taken off since that point. Directly after that fight, he ends up knocking out Tito, knocks out Vernon White, then wins his rematch with Couture, and we all know what's happened since then. He's just on a huge tear right now, knocking out all his opponents every time he's out there. So their careers have kind of gone in opposite directions since that fight, which you'd think would have happened the opposite, because Liddell is still a much older fighter than Rampage. Rampage is a great personality, very flashy, likes to talk a lot. Us American fans like that. He's very marketable, and his career's kind of hit a crossroads. He had some lackluster performances in Pride. Didn't have too much of a dominant performance over Matt Lindland, although he did beat Matt Lindland, just because he was so much bigger than Matt Lindland was pretty much the only reason why he won that fight. It was a decent fight though, and Lindland's a hard guy to fight no matter what weight class you fight in. He's still a tough guy to fight. But this rematch, I think, is going to be definitely one for the ages. I think it's going to be a lot better than the Tito Liddell rematch. I think Rampage is a much better wrestler, a much more physical wrestler than Tito. He's more committed to his takedowns, and I think he's got a much better chin than Tito too. If you notice, anytime Rampage has ever been knocked down, it's with knees. Those are big bones that create lots and lots of damage, and obviously you see what happens when they land. But I think he's just got a really great chin, and I think even in that first fight you saw Liddell catch Rampage clean a couple of times, and Rampage was able to eat those shots and still keep coming forward and pressure Chuck. If he's still able to do that again, it's going to give Chuck a lot of problems. It's going to get very frustrating for him, because Chuck's used to being so dominant and have guys almost be very tentative towards him, but Rampage's style is not that. It's a very aggressive, in-your-face style, especially with Rampage doing so well with him in their first fight. He's just going to keep coming forward and putting the pressure on him. I think Rampage has to do the exact same thing he did in that first fight, is rough up Liddell, be very physical with him, push the face, make Liddell fight when he doesn't want to fight, and obviously get some takedowns and put Liddell on his back, because for a guy that says he trains jiu-jitsu and submissions and stuff, he sure does not like being on his back. That's one thing for sure. And my prediction for this fight is pretty much, I see a guy who's going to be turning 38 years old, who's got a big snowball of momentum, who's lost to this guy already, and I think Rampage is hungry. I think he's eager to come to America and show the American public who he is. I think he's going to do that in the Eastman fight. He's going to vindicate that loss, and I think he's going to validate his status as a fighter in that second fight with Liddell. I see him beating Liddell again, because of his style, because of his ability to take you down and slam you and be physical. Liddell's style isn't the same as the shoot-a-box fighters, as Vanderlei and Shoguns. He doesn't throw a lot of knees, throws some kicks, but not many. He does have a highlight kick knockout over Babalu Sabral, but we have not seen him throw kicks as of late. He's become a dominant puncher, pretty much. He's become in love with his hands, loves throwing his hands, and I think Rampage is pretty good at throwing his hands himself. So I just think the style and who Rampage is and what kind of style he brings is definitely not going to pose too well for Liddell, and I think the cage is actually going to benefit Rampage more than the ring did, believe it or not, because when they get in the cage, Rampage is going to be able to press him up against the cage and use the cage to take him down and hold him down and ground and pound him, I think. Because the ring, you know how Pride, they always have those issues with the ring. The guys trying to keep him in the ring, and then they try to restart it in the center. I don't think there's going to be any of that. I think Rampage is going to be able to use the cage to his advantage in this fight and pull off another big win over Liddell. I know it's a bold prediction. That's my prediction. I think that's what's going to happen, and I'd be interested to see what all of you think is what's going to happen. I think Rampage is interested and definitely wants to show everybody that he's back, and I think he's going to do that against Liddell. Until then, take care and hit me off with your predictions. I'd love to see what you think is going to happen in this fight. Take care.